Let me be clear, working the Atacama is a special kind of hell. It's not the heat, it's the nothing. The dryness sucks the moisture right out of your soul. I'm Leo Vance, and for the last 6 months, my office has been a glorified trailer parked right on the edge of the Chilean desert, miles from the nearest everything. My gig? Standard seismic monitoring. We're sitting right on top of some seriously active fault lines, so my job is to listen for the Earth's grumbles, the stuff that might actually threaten a city someday. It's usually super boring, just noise analysis, filtering out road traffic, traffic, or local tremors. But about 3 weeks ago, my boring routine got totally wiped out by a signal that made no sense, absolutely zero. I first caught it during a late-night sweep. It was a rhythmic pulse, a beat so slow it was almost missed by the standard filters, like 0.5 Hz, barely a vibration. I figured it was junk data, maybe a faulty transducer, or just some weird atmospheric pressure wave messing with the ground sensors. But I'm persistent, or maybe just bored, so I spent the next 3 shifts trying to isolate it. And when I finally got a clean waveform, my blood went cold. This wasn't ambient noise. This was purposeful. It was a heartbeat. Not a geological event, not tectonic plates grinding, and definitely not a deep-sea whale song somehow transmitting through solid ground. This was a consistent, powerful, subaudible thrum coming from deep beneath the crust, and it was hitting with the precision of a Swiss clock. I started calling it the heartbeat, and it immediately became my entire life. The strangest thing, and this is where I started seriously questioning my caffeine intake, was how the beat reacted. I noticed minor fluctuations in the rhythm, tiny shifts in the waveform's amplitude, that seemed to correlate not with the environment, but with my presence. If I was calm, focused on the screen, it stayed steady. But one afternoon, I spilled a scorching hot cup of coffee right on the console. I freaked out, shouting a string of curses, and the second my adrenaline spiked, the beat accelerated. Just a fraction, maybe 0.05 Hz faster, but enough to show up clearly on the real-time analyzer. I tried testing it. I'd slam a door, yell, then sit there focusing on my own anxiety, and sure enough, the rhythm would catch up to my internal state. It was reacting to my consciousness. That's when the heartbeat stopped being a scientific anomaly and became a conversation with something impossibly vast and terrifying. I ran the data through every known model, including the highly theoretical stuff on deep mantle seismology. Nothing. No natural phenomenon could explain a rhythmic pulse from that depth that responded to human emotion. The only conclusion that fit was the one I absolutely hated: something down there was alive, and it was listening to me. The Atacama, the world's driest place, was hiding a secret far older and wetter than the desert itself. My isolation was suddenly a whole lot less comforting, because I wasn't just monitoring the Earth, I was being observed by it. I was starting to feel like a mosquito tapping on a drum the size of the continent, and the drummer was finally paying attention. I knew I couldn't report this. Not if I wanted to keep my job, or my sanity. So, I packed up the rover and decided to trace the sound back to its source, alone. My tracking methodology wasn't exactly textbook. I used a series of portable geophones, burying them in a grid pattern and triangulating the signal based on minor phase delays. The pulse was powerful, but tracing a signal at 0.5 Hz across miles of solid rock is like trying to find a whisper in a hurricane. It took me 4 days, fueled entirely by stale energy bars and a growing dread that was now a constant, icy weight in my stomach. The heat was brutal, easily topping 110 degrees, but the constant awareness of that slow, immense beat beneath my feet was the real killer. It felt like the ground itself was mocking the brevity of my own quick, frantic pulse. Finally, the triangulation narrowed the source down to a specific, absolutely unremarkable patch of flat ground, an ancient, dried-up salt lake bed. Just blindingly white, cracked salt crust, stretching out to the horizon. I started digging. Not with heavy equipment, because A, I didn't have any, and B, I wasn't about to explain excavating a perfectly fine salt flat to the authorities. I used a shovel, the kind you'd keep in your truck for sand. It was grueling work. The salt layer was thick and tough, baked hard by centuries of sun. After maybe 7 hours, when the sun was starting its nasty descent, I hit something that wasn't salt and wasn't rock. It was dense, but yielded slightly under the shovel. I switched to brushes and hand trowels, feeling like a caricature of an archaeologist. And that's when the real discovery started to surface. It wasn't pottery. It wasn't metal. It was a shape, defined by perfectly preserved, crystalline salt, a human form. I spent the rest of the twilight carefully clearing the salt crust. What emerged was shocking. Not just a skeleton, but a perfectly desiccated mummy, preserved by the incredible dryness and the surrounding halite. It looked ancient, far older than the last known tribes in the area. The skin was taut, like thin leather pulled tight over bone, and the features were frozen in a look that wasn't pain or fear, but something closer to intense, focused concentration. The mummy wasn't buried haphazardly, it was positioned vertically, nestled deep within a massive, single pillar of crystalline salt. It was clearly an intentional, ceremonial placement. But the most disturbing detail was what the mummy held. Cradled tightly against its desiccated chest was a thick, flat piece of obsidian. It wasn't shaped like a tool or a weapon. It was perfectly circular, about the size of a dinner plate, and etched deeply into its glassy surface was the same pattern I had seen on the seismic analysis, the inverted spiral. It looked less like an artifact and more like a seal. The entire scene screamed of a purpose, a terrible, desperate purpose that involved one person staying perfectly still for centuries. As my own quick heartbeat hammered in my ears, I realized the heartbeat was coming directly from beneath this salt tomb. The mummy wasn't resting here, it was working. I was totally wiped, but the fear kept the exhaustion from settling in. I carefully retrieved the mummy's obsidian seal. It was heavy, cool to the touch despite the desert air, and the etched spiral seemed to absorb the twilight light. As I lifted it, I noticed fragments of dried, leather-like material clutched in the mummy's hand. Not just skin, but finely tooled pieces of hide, a fragmented, desiccated scroll. This wasn't just some forgotten burial, this was a library. I immediately packed up the mummy and the scroll fragments, placing the obsidian seal reverently on the passenger seat of the rover. The entire ride back to the station, I felt a heavy, dull thump resonating through the floorboards. It was the heartbeat, now louder, and without the mummy's presence, the rhythm felt slightly erratic, nervous. Back at the station, I spent the next 36 hours trying to conserve and translate the brittle scroll. The language was a dead dialect of an extinct Andean language, but my undergrad archaeology minor finally paid off. The documents belonged to a long-forgotten society they called the Keepers of the Silence, a secretive sect of the local indigenous culture that disappeared around 300 years ago, the approximate age of the mummy. Their purpose was terrifyingly clear. They were the last defense against something they called the pulsing abyss, an awareness of the deep earth that existed solely to abolish order and initiate geological chaos. The abyss wasn't a natural fault line, it was a living, sentient entity buried beneath the desert floor. The most disturbing revelation was the abyss's weapon, the silent tremor. The scroll described it not as a wave of physical motion, but as a subaudible sonic broadcast, a specific frequency of infrasound so powerful it wouldn't shake the ground, but would shake the human brain apart. It caused instant, irreversible neurological breakdown, mass hysteria, catatonia, and then death. The abyss was waiting for the perfect moment to broadcast its demise signal to the surface world. And that's where the mummy came in. He wasn't a sacrifice, he was the Warden. The scroll explained that the Warden's unique purpose was to use his life force, channeled through the Obsidian Seal, to absorb and suppress the rhythmic heartbeat of the abyss. His constant, focused energy acted as a biological buffer, maintaining the silence so the abyss couldn't initiate its seismic broadcast. The mummy wasn't dead, he was working. And by removing the seal and the body, I had effectively just served his 300-year notice of termination. The rhythm I was hearing was the abyss waking up, realizing its prison guard was gone. The very moment I finished the last translation, a chilling warning that, the silence is the cage, it happened. I was sitting at the console, the Obsidian Seal resting next to the mummy's scroll fragments, when the rhythm spiked violently. The 0.5 Hz heartbeat slammed into a rapid 1.2 Hz, a frantic, enraged beat. My console, despite being calibrated to ignore ambient noise, screamed with red alerts. But the ground wasn't shaking. My physical seismographs showed nothing. It was all happening in the realm of infrasound, the silent tremor, beginning its catastrophic test run. The effect was immediate and hellish. I didn't hear anything, but my body felt it. A crushing, overwhelming pressure slammed into my inner ear, followed by a wave of pure, irrational panic. It felt like every single nerve ending was screaming at once. I grabbed my head, staggering. The lights in the trailer flickered, not from power failure, but from the sound waves vibrating the circuitry. I started having vivid, terrifying auditory hallucinations, whispers that dissolved the second I tried to focus, and the distinct, wet sound of something groping through salt. My heart rate was 180, and my mind was racing through every single one of my life's regrets in rapid fire. I was having a localized, personalized neurological meltdown. This was the silent tremor. I managed to stumble over to the Obsidian Seal. As the infrasound pulsed violently, I saw it, a new fissure, a spiderweb crack, spreading across the perfect, glassy black surface. The seal was losing its integrity. The Warden's 300 years of work was literally cracking under the pressure of the awakened abyss. I knew right then that if the seal failed entirely, the abyss would hit the surface with its full, world-ending broadcast. I had less than an hour, maybe less than 30 minutes, before the silent tremor reached full amplitude and scrambled my brain entirely. The scroll provided one, chilling solution: succession. The new Warden must use their own life force to stabilize the seal, performing the ritual while still alive. It involved cutting one's palm, letting blood drip onto the Obsidian Seal, and then allowing the salt, the original sealing agent, to completely cover the body and seal the life force into the Earth's silent defense grid. There was no one to call, nowhere to run. The choice was brutally clear: let the world end in a silent neurological scream, or take the mummy's place in the infinite, sun-baked silence. The decision wasn't noble, it was survival. The survival of everyone else. I grabbed my survival knife, the same one I'd used to unearth the Warden. The infrasound was now a constant, buzzing terror, making my skin crawl and my vision blur with phantom images of movement in the dust outside. I knew I couldn't do the sealing ritual inside the trailer. It had to be at the exact point of the anomaly, over the abyss itself. I managed to strap the Obsidian Seal to my chest, right over my heart, and carried the Warden's scroll fragments, my knife, and a bag of coarse, unused salt back into the rover. The drive back to the salt flat was a blur of high-speed terror, the infrasound making the entire vehicle vibrate violently. When I reached the spot, the air felt thick, heavy with the silent pressure. The crystalline salt around the Warden's empty grave was now shimmering with a strange, oily residue, the abyss leaking its influence upward. I performed the ritual quickly, mechanically. I used the knife to make a deep cut across my palm, letting my blood run freely onto the cool, cracked surface of the Obsidian Seal. As the blood touched the black stone, the buzzing in my head spiked one last time, a blinding wave of pain, and then, absolute, profound silence. The heartbeat was gone from my sensors. The neurological scream vanished. My mind was suddenly clear, terrifyingly so. I lowered myself into the empty salt crypt, placing my hands over the now warm, sticky seal. The final step. The salt. I tipped the heavy bag over my head and torso. The salt poured over me, cool at first, then rapidly stinging the wound on my palm. It wasn't just covering me, it was crystallizing, rapidly bonding to my clothes, my skin, sealing me into a crystalline prison. I felt my lungs tighten, my movement slow, my heart, my own frantic, quick heart, start to slow its pace to match the old rhythm. I was becoming the new biological battery, the new dampener. Now, years later, I don't feel the heat or the cold. I don't hear the wind. I only perceive the slow, steady thump, 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 of the abyss beneath me, and my job is to keep that 0.5 Hz stable. My consciousness is bound to the seal, filtering the terrifying frequency of the silent tremor. I am the Salt Warden. My job is simple: listen, and keep the silence. Sometimes, I sense the seismic monitoring rover that brought me here is still running, recording the endless silence. I hope someone eventually finds the final entry I managed to transmit before the salt claimed my fingers, a warning not to disturb the desert's peace. But honestly, I hope no one ever comes. Because if they do, they might mistake my petrified salt body for a prize. And if they break the seal, the world will finally hear the terrible, unspeakable sound that I, the last warden, gave my life to suppress. And the long wait will begin again. My only company is the infinite desert, the eternal salt, and the silent, pulsing threat beneath my feet. And I wait.